Okay, so did you say that we're recording now?
Yes, we are.
All right, I will call this meeting to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent,
Here.
Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Woodings,
Here.
all present.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I assume we're going to skip the invocation and pledge since we aren't there together. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I have some motions. I think it'll be best if I make these as 3 separate motions. I move to defer ordinance 1220, an ordinance repealing and replacing Title I, Chapter 15, Emergency Powers, enacting a new Chapter 15 to Title I, Boise City Code to a date certain of April 7th, 2020, as the amendments were not complete at the time the agenda was published.
Second.
Do I have a speaker? If I send this to you,
Mike Masterson, you are on.
I'm not hearing them.
Okay, Mike Masterson is muted.
Yeah.
I am trying to pull up the agenda.
Well, so this is pre-agenda.
Oh, gotcha. All right, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to defer Resolution 12320, a resolution approving news rack fees, and Ordinance 1020, an ordinance enacting regulations of news racks and associated fees to May 5th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And finally, Madam Mayor, I move to defer public hearings for CAR 1932 and the associated SUB 19077, CAR 1928, and PUD 1942 until further notice.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right. Okay. Great, thank you. So now we've moved on to request for approval the minutes of March 24th.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the minutes of March 24th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we have special business. The appointment of Patrick Falls to the Plumbing and Mechanical Code Board for 3-year term ending March 2023, and John Van Stone to the Electrical Code Board for a 4-year term ending March 20.
Madam Mayor,
Sorry, there's a mistake in this agenda. This says March 2020. 4-year term, I'm going to imagine it's 2024.
yeah. I had already corrected that. I believe that's what it is.
Okay, great.
All right, great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask unanimous consent that we appoint Patrick Falls to the Plumbing and Mechanical Code Board for a 3-year term ending March 31st, 2023, and John Van Stone to the Electrical Code Board for a 4-year term ending March 2024.
Second.
I think unanimous.
That was
consent.
unanimous consent. Without objection? Can
Halliburton.
someone mute themselves if they are listening to something else or not talking? We've got some background noise. from someone.
Madam Mayor, I believe one of these folks might be online to say a few words, but I'm not positive.
Great. Is either Patrick or John with us today?
It doesn't look like it from my end.
Okay. All
Well,
right,
thank
we
you.
thought they might be able to.
Thank you both for your service.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have the weekly update. with-
Point of order,
Yes.
I need to still do the voting.
Oh, that was unanimous consent. So
Oh.
nobody objected. So we're both are now officially appointed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and now we have our weekly update emergency preparedness approach for COVID-19.
Madam Mayor, council members.
Thanks, Mallory.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I've tried this before and it worked. There we go. So now you guys should all be able to see my PowerPoint slides.
Yes.
Okay. And I will see if I can read them behind the videos. Okay. So per usual, a little update on the numbers for this week. The cases across the US and in Idaho rose pretty significantly. Just at 5 o'clock today, the state was reporting 525 cases in the state and 195 of those within Ada County. Testing has ramped up quite significantly in the private labs. I think they've brought a couple more online. So to date, 6,600 approximately tests that have been run. And I know the hospital systems still have a bit of a backlog. So I think we're going to continue to see those numbers increase as the labs are able to work through the testing. And I put together a quick little chart just on the numbers I've been tracking from the state's website, just so we can kind of see a quick graphical representation of how we're doing. This is just state data, numbers over time frame. So you can see the state is that orange line and our Ada County is that blue line. So pretty similar curves, but it looks like, I think based on Blaine County, the state is a little bit steeper than we are here in Ada County for the time being. We have gotten an update from the State Department of Health and Welfare. Their Division of Public Health has been working with the universities on some state level modeling. So once that modeling is available, they are planning to share it down to the local jurisdictions and the health districts for our use. And they're anticipating that it should be done this week if all goes well. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of that data and start to use it to have it to inform our policy decisions going forward. A quick update on city operations. Things continue to go really well with everyone working remote. All essential services and functions that can be provided given the current situation are continuing. There have been some new kind of guidelines implemented for those folks that work with our field staff. So construction sites, things like that, to ensure that they're following the same safety protocols that we request to keep our employees safe as they have to continue to work out in the field. There's also the potential for some ongoing issues with the public in parks and trails, the greenbelt, et cetera, especially as the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders continue for some time. If people start to feel a little tired of those orders as this time goes on, we might see an increase in the population in those areas. So that's something we're keeping on the radar. And then
Madam Mayor,
Oh. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Jimmy here. I was just curious if we could hear a little bit more. I know that the Parks and Rec, they had mentioned an ambassador program, and I don't know if that ambassador program is still kind of our main mechanism as far as enforcement goes in the park, and if there's any other things that we're doing there to make sure that people are following those guidelines.
And I'll ask Jade if you have any more information on that from Parks. I don't know that I have an update personally.
Right now we're using the traffic enforcement officers and other field staff to be out there talking with the public about the importance of distancing.
Yeah, which is, it's what we've been, I think, doing for the past week or so. So continuing on that. And then as a city, also going to start across all the departments, revisiting some of those, our essential services and functions we identified, as it looks like, you know, we're probably going to be in this for maybe a little longer than we thought initially. So we want to make sure that we're set to continue our city operations, given that this event goes on for a little bit longer duration as it's looking like it might.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
going back up to that last item, I've had some questions from members of the public who live near construction sites and wondered what the guidelines were that folks were supposed to be following, and who, if anyone, they should report things to if they believe they're not being followed.
Mayor, I can handle this, Jade. I can forward, my apologies. I thought we had forwarded out those
Yeah,
guidelines.
we got those. I just don't think are they posted anywhere? Does
I'll double check that, council member. The one thing we were trying to do is anybody that's scheduled an inspection, they would, as part of the schedule, get a preset of those standards. So they couldn't claim that they didn't know what the rules of engagement were with the inspection staff. And then we will certainly share those with all the neighborhood associations, which we haven't done, kind of
that's a good idea.
per your question. And but both AGC and BCA, we sent them initially to them and they forwarded those on to all their members. And we were just very frank saying, you know, we're willing to provide this service, but everybody needs to be a good player in fairness to our employees for public health. So I think if any members of the public felt like contractors or developers weren't abiding by those, we'll go ahead and maybe just get that word out that they should just contact PDS, who would follow up on that.
Thank you.
So a little bit of a summary from the resource center, the calls and emails that the city has been fielding kind of through the Ask a Librarian program. These graphs are a little funky, but trying to show a trend of total calls and emails that were received versus the number of them that were COVID related. So a pretty high percentage of these calls and emails have been COVID related since this was started staffed a week and a half ago, I believe. And the only blip on the emails you'll see is the spike in the emails, and then it doesn't show a corresponding spike in the percentage that related to COVID. That's because that was the day of the initial social distancing order. And as they were fielding a lot of calls, they were having them send in emails as follow-up to make sure that they could respond to the questions. So they weren't able to accurately track the emails that day that were COVID related because they kind of got so many that were a follow-up to the phone calls. But that's definitely been the biggest spike in impact to that resource center, but it still remains staffed 7 days a week. So public safety update, I believe you guys should have gotten an email a little bit before the meeting with outlining both police and fire's measures that they've taken to ensure the safety of their first responders. I'll provide a couple of high level points, and then if you guys could review that, and if you have any questions, I know both Chief Masterson and Chief Oldenburg and Chief Gervais from Police and Fire are on the line to answer any questions. But again, at that high level, there are health screenings for both police and fire to do that kind of initial screening when they're coming on shift, make sure there's no fever, answer a quick questionnaire to ensure they're healthy. There's been increased cleaning and decontamination procedures implemented when entering stations, when coming off shift, in the vehicles, things like that. Both departments have implemented an infection control officer position to help with tracking of exposures. And then a slight reduced response to low priority calls, just things that if it can be conducted not in person, to do it not in person. On the fire side, not sending as many resources in initially to reduce that impact potentially to any of our responders. So those are some of the kind of high level things. And then I'll go through some quick calls for service overviews, and then I'll open it up for you guys to ask questions of the chiefs. So on the fire side, overall calls for service are down, most likely due to the stay-at-home orders. In February, they were averaging about 8 COVID-related like calls a day. And this last week, it was up to 9.9. And then they are looking in their systems at those specific call types, and they can break those down by call type and volume, and are using GIS and stuff to monitor where those calls are occurring. On the police side, calls for service down approximately 2,000 for the month, mainly in traffic stops and accidents, but with some increase in, looks like juvenile citizens assist and welfare checks. So with that, I'll go back up to those initial bullets. And if you guys have any questions for police or fire, I would welcome those now. All right. Hearing none, you guys again have that update that you received with a little more detail. So moving on to our vulnerable populations. And I'll again provide an overview, and then Christine is available if you guys have any more in-depth questions. So with the homeless population, working with healthcare and Our Path Home to look at some pre-identified facilities in case there needs to be increased isolation of persons, both kind of preventatively when their tests are pending, and then when they've been tested for positive. So more details to come on that as they get those details finalized. That'll come out as a memo. They are also working on the Meals on Wheels program and childcare operations to ensure that healthcare providers and those essential services for families are continuing. And then most recently, they've developed kind of a prototype, this food pantry idea, which is a GIS map for families and those with children to be able to easily locate where food is being distributed and meals. And so I think that has been prototyped. I'm not sure when the potential go live date on that is, but I know they're working on it. And then continuing that outreach for our non-native English speakers and refugee populations.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So in reference to the vulnerable populations, thank you, Mallory. Something I've been getting information from or being contacted by the public is concerns about businesses who don't appear to be changing their work practices to incorporate the 6 feet distancing between workers and the public. The most recent one has to do with an employer in Boise whose staff is comprised primarily of immigrants and refugees. And the person who reported this to BPD. I'm checking to see, do we have anything in place to deal with issues like that, where we've got members of the public who are from those vulnerable populations, but who feel compelled to continue to work in an unsafe environment because the employer, for whatever reason, has not instituted any sort of change?
I don't know who's best to field that one, Madam Mayor or Chief Masterson. I know they've been fielding phone calls in relation to that.
I'm going to let Ron Weininger tell you what we're doing with those calls that are coming in.
So when we get those calls, certainly we'll respond and take a look and see if there's anything inappropriate going on. But we've encouraged our officers not to make contact unless they need to when we get the calls for people not social distancing or businesses staying open when they shouldn't. We've been actually directed by city legal to have those folks who call in those types of complaints, we refer them to the Department of Health and Welfare's hotline. That's what we've been asked to do so far.
It's important to note that at this point, the governor's order preempted ours, or we saw it as that. So I've rescinded my order, and that's why it makes sense that those calls would go to health and welfare for enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, they all, these orders only work if the government agency that issues them is willing to enforce. And that's really important, that we've got to protect our community by ensuring that some sort of enforcement or follow-up is taking place.
Madam Mayor.
While we're stopped, if I could, I was going to potentially ask this question earlier and I didn't, but have we seen, Chief Masterson or Deputy Chief Weininger, have we seen an increased call for domestic violence cases?
Anecdotally, we believe that there is an increase in domestic violence cases. We haven't got really up-to-date numbers, but we've requested those and should have them, I would think, in the next day or so, what that looks like. This is all moving pretty rapidly, though.
And it's going to be part of a dashboard that we will have available that Jade can decide who has access to, but it'll include specific calls for service types as well as our response to hazardous locations.
And then I guess as follow-up, are we working with various partners to make sure that as those calls come in, if need be, those folks can get referred to somewhere where they can be out of danger?
Absolutely. We've been reassured a number of times that the WCA is still open and up and running for business, and we will make sure that any victims that need services get connected with those services. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
I think going back to Lisa's question, so it sounds like there's, potentially two different things going on, right? You've got businesses who either know the restrictions, they know the social distancing orders, and they're not actually enacting them, and that's a matter of enforcement. And it sounds like what you're saying is the state is the one who would be in charge of enforcing those types of things. I still think that there may be some education for those businesses that I'm continuing to get reached out to on a regular basis. Are we essential or are we not essential? Or even businesses that say, okay, well, we are deemed an essential business, so we're going to go ahead and do business as usual. We're going to continue to offer all the things that we were offering beforehand, and maybe we'll put some social distancing in place. So I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for additional education for businesses to let them know that, like, yes, you are essential, but here are some of the guidelines that you need to make sure that you're doing so that they're not violating things that they know that they're unaware that they actually are violating. I'm wondering if there's any additional outreach for businesses out there.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I can't tell who that was, but
This is Jade. So, council member, it's a good point, and that's kind of, we can certainly amp up kind of a tagline on social media that the Resource Center is very willing to kind of serve as that educational and filtering spot if people are, they want to be good actors, but they're unclear of the guidelines. That certainly is the purpose of that Resource Center, to kind of get those questions answered of a business who might be unclear whether they're applicable or not.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Jade. I appreciate that. I think that we have so many different businesses that are reaching out because they just don't know. So, for example, like we had our auto dealers that were reaching out recently because auto supply and auto repair are listed as essential businesses. But should people still be selling, Lexuses, or is that something that's still essential? Can they still do that? And I think that they don't always know the answer, and so they just see that they're on there, and then they assume that they can continue to do it or that they don't need to alter their services. In some situations like that one on the state's page, there's a specific example for auto dealers, and you can see where the state responded to it that, like, yes, you can do that. I still think that there's a need, and maybe there's some potential for it to come from the city to be as specific as we can to as many different types of businesses that we can, so that they just have some clear direction. Because I think there's a lot of people that want to behave the right way. They just aren't quite sure what it is. So yeah, I think that any extra communication that we can get out there, any examples that we can give, the better. Thank you.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, this is Christine.
Christine, go ahead.
We have scheduled a weekly update to our community partners, and so I would be happy to take a stab at including that messaging and increasing our awareness building.
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
I believe a lot of folks are taking advantage of social media as a way to learn. I really appreciate the Facebook Lives that you've been doing. I think those are really helpful to folks. I also appreciate the town halls that Governor Little has done. I think I've seen him more on social media now than ever, and it's necessary. And I think for folks who might be intimidated by logging onto a website or even getting lost and trying to find the information they need, I think having our voices, your voice, the voice of council members, be able to talk them through some of these issues, I think is the way to go. So I would encourage us to embrace that tool. I know I would like some information so that we can all be a chorus in educating our community. And I think it's something that people will share. They're not always going to share the link to a website, but they will share a video. I know that whenever you, Madam Mayor, or Council Member Woodings, or Council Member, any of you, when any of you do anything, I share it because it's important information. And I think it's just the way people receive it these days. So I would propose that we embrace those opportunities as well.
Okay.
Okay, so continuing and speaking a little bit to what Christine mentioned on the community partnership side, they have a resource connector tool ready to launch, and that's something being done here at the city level to support matching organizations that have resources with organizations that may be in need. And this is, you know, knowing that the United Way is doing a really great job of matching PPE with healthcare providers that need it, and the state 211 care line is being trying to be used to be an additional resource for folks looking either for things or that have things. This is something we can provide at the local level to assist with some resource needs and resource matching. And then, as Christine mentioned, in addition to those kind of three groups that are on the previous slide, there are also some focus areas in the nonprofit communities and the business communities. And so they are doing what will be weekly outreach and updates to those communities, specifically the nonprofit and the faith sectors. And then the business communication has been kind of ongoing throughout this. And so then just a quick little blurb on some recovery stuff. I'm sure you guys all saw that the CARES Act was signed last Friday, and it has a couple of provisions relevant to kind of our community. On the small business side, there's the Paycheck Protection Program, which provides some assistance to small businesses, as well as an expanded economic injury disaster loan program. They've expanded that a little bit. I'm going to refrain from talking too much about it because I am not as much of a policy wonk, if you will, and I don't want to misspeak on some of the stuff that's out there, but did want to highlight that small business relief is available through this act, as well as some increased benefits and expanded eligibility on the unemployment front, and especially expanding who that coverage is available to. And I believe that's all that we have for this week.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yes,
Councilman Thompson?
thank you. I was just wondering if you've heard back anything, response from the letter about rent to the governor in that regard, or if anything's happening on those fronts. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Sorry, I should have done more of an intro at the beginning, but I was distracted by our new news. The courts, we did not receive official communication back from the governor in a response to our letter. However, the courts are only taking up a small number of cases in the foreseeable future. And they are only taking up one kind of eviction. You have to file evictions in court. And those are evictions for the cause where the tenant was making drugs in the apartment or the home that was being rented. So all other eviction proceedings, filings are paused because the courts are paused. So effectively, they're paused. The state could take action and make that more blatant, but from like a practice perspective, evictions will not be able to be carried out because they can't be filed or followed through in the court system.
Thank you.
We also, I referenced last week, sent a letter to Central District Health with the school district asking for some specific information. They answered us not in official form, but I believe to the best of their ability. They do not have the predictive analytics that I believe we need to have. So on Friday, I asked for a meeting with the Department of Health and Welfare, and they were unable to meet. So on Sunday, I wrote them a letter with the list of data points that our innovation and performance team would like to have to help us predict or to have a sense of when we should be prepared with our own community support programs for surge, but also recognizing that people can't pick a date for when we open up again, that really the virus will be choosing that, and to understand better the likely behavior of the virus in our community would be very valuable. I received communication back today from the director of the Department of Health and Welfare saying that this week they expect to have modeling available for Idaho communities that will be available to cities to aid in some of these forward projecting policy conversations we'll need to have.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I've been contacted by at least one city staff member who, I mean, it just speaks to the high level of people that we have working for the city. The staff member reached out to me saying, I want to do something. I know that there are nonprofits out there who are working really hard. They don't have a lot of resources. Their staffs are overwhelmed. And I don't have as much to do as I once did because of the changes we've had to make because of COVID-19. And this person's asking me, is there a possibility that we can go and redirect our efforts to help some of these nonprofits? And, you know, Jesse Tree is one that comes to mind. I know they've been really slammed with the public needing help with these rental situations. What is the possibility of us having some of our city staff who feels that they have the capacity to help in that way?
That's a great question. Some city staff have been redeployed with new jobs, temporary responsibilities, given the current needs. Given that we're in a shelter-in-place environment, we need to stay home. As a city, we can't necessarily deploy staff to other organizations. However, there are ways that all citizens can figure out how best they could be helpful by either contacting organizations directly that they're interested in supporting and working that out, rather than as a city us doing that, or by having by going through the appropriate staffing channels, which is working with that person's supervisor about the potential for doing something more. And Christine Miller is overseeing the community support work of the city. All of these teams are being led by professional staff that are working day in, day out on these things. She has a sense of what's needed and when we will be deploying certain projects, and then it's supervisor by supervisor whether or not city staff can go do other things.
Madam Mayor?
Yep.
Thank you. One last question. Do we, in asking for the data and the projections, do we have, I know that there's some other folks working on projections. Do we have any idea about when we will have some kind of projections that will give us a chance to prepare for when the peak will be and understand maybe how big it might be so that we can be prepared for that
Health
size
Officer
of
said
peak.
this week that they're working with the universities and they expect to have models this week.
When is that?
This week. Health
This
and
week,
Welfare
okay.
said
I didn't hear
they
a time.
expect to have models this week. We won't get the data ourselves, but the universities are working on models.
Okay, great, thank you.
And on that, before we leave, I don't know if people are watching this right now or not, but many of you did feel an earthquake.
Yeah.
It's out of the Cape Horn area, back by the put-in for the Middle Fork, was a 6.5. There was just a second small aftershock a couple minutes ago. And I just like the community to know that there's very real possibility with an earthquake of that size, we'll feel more. Our first responders are out doing building checks downtown. We've already done a scan of all of our public works facilities and they all look good. And there has been an uptick in emergency calls. So we have police, EMS, and fire out to about 15 calls right now. But it was 80 or so miles from us here. And so it felt not at all like a 6.5, but it's very possible we'll feel something more. And just to wrap and I've noticed a lot of people are outside, so please check on your neighbors, but observe the 6 feet of social distancing so that in response to an earthquake, we don't transmit a virus. So thank you all. I really just want to give a shout out to our team that's worked this week on the community response panel. We're the team of staff working on that innovation performance team, Christine Miller, Maureen Brewer, especially with her leadership around planning to support those experiencing homelessness in our population, are doing great work. And we'll have more information on specific needs and plans in the coming weeks. But the partnership with the shelters and nonprofit community is sound, and I really appreciate the partnership that I'm witnessing between staff of the city and the providers of services that are going to be so key in the long run. And tomorrow's April 1st. I think that's something that's super important to stress to each of us in our community and our teams that wherever we work, is that we don't get to choose a date for when this changes. It's the virus that will choose the date. And we have to be nimble, agile, and recognize that there will likely be longer changes to our typical behavior and patterns than the current order that we have from the governor, and that public health and safety and elected officials around this valley are already talking about that, what that looks like. And then, of course, what it means for our long-term recovery and support of people in our community. So thanks to everybody that has continued to work on this. We're going to see an uptick in cases every day because there's more testing now that is able to occur. We've long said we needed more testing. We don't have the amount that we need to properly be able to separate those with the virus from the public. And so as that's happening too, we know that spread will continue. So observing the governor's stay-at-home order, not shopping if you don't need to, doing as much as you can to separate yourselves from people will help you, your families, and all of us in the long run. So thank you, Mallory and Jade. And who else was on?
Hey, Madam Mayor, I missed the click just a second ago. I had one more question.
Okay.
So a couple weeks ago, one of the folks from CE, Wayne, reached out about the census, which is also tomorrow, Census Day.
Oh, that's right, Census Day tomorrow.
Yeah, Census Day tomorrow, so don't forget about that. But he provided like some really incredible tools to each specific city council member, where he had created, him and some of the folks in CE had created some messaging for city council members to push out to the community about the census. And it was incredibly helpful. I know our folks at CE and so many other departments are just completely slammed with stuff. I'm hoping that maybe in the next couple weeks, as things do start to get more difficult, and as we start to see and kind of an upward turn in the amount of people testing positive and all the stuff that's going on, I would love to have the help of CE in creating some more messaging for city council specific around any type of stuff that you and the city are wanting us to blast out there. I think that all of us, and even beyond our city council, our leaders in the community, are so excited and eager to help share information that would be beneficial for everyone. So if CE has the ability to create any messaging for city council members that we could help push out, I know that would be extremely helpful for me and something that I think I would love to be able to pass on to other folks. And then just the last thing is I had gotten an update, I think it was from fire station number 8 the other day, who is now going out at 8 o'clock at the request of some of their neighbors and ringing their bell at 8 o'clock and encouraging neighbors to come out of their house, open their door, bang pots and pans together and make some noise just to let everybody know that they're still there. And it just kind of reminded me that there's so many of these heroes who are finding a way to make impact in their community one way or another. And, you know, it's happening at our fire department, it's happening with our neighbors. Our poor folks at the wastewater treatment plant, you know, are working harder than ever around the clock, trying to make sure that all the weird stuff that we're flushing down the toilet isn't preventing people from getting their water. So there are so many great people out there who are doing some really, really great stuff. And so I think any way that we can help communicate that stuff out to the public and be helpful would just be so wonderful. But I really appreciate everything that everyone's doing, and Mallory and the team and legal. I know people are working around the clock, and everyone in the mayor's office. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, yes, and there are, I mean, it sounds like Wayne's talked with you had some materials. I'm sure that there could be others that could be shared with each of you because you can never communicate too much. Are we good on questions?
Mayor, since
Yes.
you asked, Madam Mayor, so I think we've all observed folks who have still not heeded the order about the physical distancing. Is there a possibility at some point when you will make the very difficult decision to possibly close the parks and close those areas where people are still congregating, still treating this like it's a holiday rather than a really serious situation where we have to stay home, we have to stay out of those public areas? I mean, I know how hard it is to stay inside when the weather is nice and being cooped up, but it's serious. And will we get to that point? Do you anticipate us getting to that point?
I have said all along that it's very possible that we get to the point where we have to close our parks. We are not at that point right now, and that's why we have people going through. And just like any enforcement issue, we can never get people everywhere. So we have people going through. We are attempting to make it clear that we're serious about the need to separate, but recognize that people need to be outside for mental health reasons, if not anything more. But we don't know what's next. We can't predict what's next. And so I'd say that any and all options will be on the table at the time that it presents itself as necessary. I won't shy from making those decisions if we have to make them. And each of us needs to keep reminding the public through the mediums that we have that it's serious and that the 6 feet is super important. I've noticed, and there's cell phone data to show it, that while we see a lot of people in the parks now still together, there's been quite a bit more distancing than before. You can see marked data points in terms of the distancing that's happening. So that tells me that while we all notice it because we're attuned to it and the trails are more full than they have been necessarily on weekends in the past, people are doing what they can. I'd say the majority of people are trying, and then there's always that minority of folks that just are disregarding, and it's on each of us to continue to remind the public of that.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And I think it's so important that all of us continue to say that to all the members of the public, and privately today, as I went out on my walk, I've noticed a lot more that people were waiting for someone to pass at a corner before they went to the corner so that they didn't have to be there at the same time. And you can still smile and wave and say thank you and acknowledge that we're both out there together, and we both need to do that for our mental health, but we can do it in a way that's safe. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to continue to remind folks, and I appreciate your leadership on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I'd like to move us to the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I would move that all items on the consent agenda be approved.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Char, clerk, will you please?
Holly Burton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
So Madam Mayor, I think there's only one thing left, and that's the new business item A.
Sorry, I was on mute. I didn't realize that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so we don't have a third reading or first, second, and third reading.
Right.
Okay, item A.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Excuse me, point of order. I just need to clarify. I did not get that ordinance 10-20 was deferred.
There was, Char,
I did get I'm sorry. I did get ordinance 12-20 and the resolution 123-20, and that all the other public hearings were going to be deferred indefinitely. I did not get ordinance 10-20.
Madam Mayor, if we need to do it again, I can. I believe I read the motion that included both resolution 123-20 and ordinance 10-20. That was my intent.
That was
on the same motion.
Council President, that is the motion that you made. Was clerk, it was for both of them.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay.
It's all right. We're all getting used to this new thing.
All right, Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution 132-20. If I get a second, I'll have an explanation.
Second,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This resolution approves and ratifies your actions concerning the public health emergency with orders 2001, suspension of public meetings, public health emergency order 2002, restaurants and bars, and amended public health emergency order 2003, social distancing. This resolution further approves and ratifies the mayor's order vacating emergency orders 2002 and amended order 2003 subsequent to Governor Little's emergency stay-at-home order.
Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify for folks that these orders were put into place for 30 days. Many of them will still be in place after Governor Little's 21-day stay-at-home order expires. So these will still be in full force unless they're rescinded prior to that. Am I correct on that?
Madam Mayor, as I understand it, the 2002 and 03 are vacated at present, but could certainly be reinstated at the end of Governor Little's order.
Yes, just to clarify, the council president's correct on that. I issued orders rescinding orders or late last week in response to the governor's order. However, I have asked staff to prepare a stay home, stay healthy order, a restaurant and bars order, and a social distancing order that I will reissue as of the close of the 15th of April, when the governor's order ends, unless his is extended. So we will have those ready in the event that we need them.
Wonderful. Thank you for the clarification.
And Madam Mayor, this action is just to ensure that we as the council express our support to stand behind you on these orders and live up to our responsibility as legislators to city legislators to act on these orders as our understanding of our duty is. So I'm very supportive of the orders and the actions you've taken, and I'm happy to bring forward this resolution tonight.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right. And if I read the deferrals correctly, that was the last piece of business on this long agenda that we have. Okay, great. If there's no further business to come before the council, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you for everyone's composure through the earthquake. Good job, guys.
Were you guys all on at the same time when it was going?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't here yet. I had some technical issues.
Well, I was like looking